Hello and good evening. Welcome everyone to the Epic Understanding Show. I am your host, Coach Love, and I'm very pleased to be adding to our wealth of information regarding addiction. Today, I have a gentleman here that is so passionate about helping those get through and face their addiction so they can not only survive, but they can thrive after their addiction. Mike Chandra, welcome to the program. How are you?
I am amazing, Coach Love. Thank you for having me here tonight.
Awesome. So before we really get into all that you do over there at Choices Treatment Center, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, I am here in beautiful, very cold Lincoln, Nebraska tonight. And a little bit about me. I am 435 days bet free. I was a gambling addict for a very long time. So for probably since I was a teenager, I had some sort of problematic gambling. So
Mm-hmm.
basically 25 years of my life I spent in one form or another with problematic behavior regarding gambling. And probably in the last few years of it is when it really, truly reached a disordered status. And once I got to that point, I hit rock bottom a few times, had my ups and downs, lots of debt, lots of heartache, lots of depression, lots of anxiety. Just finally got to a point one day in December of 2020 where I decided I was done. And I was very fortunate because I didn't reach rock bottom the way some people have, but I just decided I was tired. I lived a double life for way too long. And once I reached that point where I was done with that life, I wanted to move forward and I got into a recovery program. Fortunately, I met Deb Hammond, who is the director of Choices Treatment Center. She helped me get in the right direction as far as starting my recovery, worked with her for uh, quite a while. I mean, basically until I started working for Choices Treatment Center. Back in November is when I started with them. And I am an education and outreach coordinator for them. My background is in sales and in marketing. So for me, taking the step and using my skills that I already have and putting them into something that I'm very passionate about in addiction recovery was just a natural fit for me. And I'm so happy to be doing what I'm doing these days.
Excellent. And so, what I want you to just dive right into is this idea of having a gambling addiction. And the reason why I want to talk about this one first is because number one, it seems to be on the rise with sports gambling being made legal, right?
Absolutely.
Yes. And then in addition to that, gambling addiction seems to be one that wreaks havoc on the whole entire family very quickly.
Absolutely. So I can talk to both of those things. First of all, they call gambling addiction the silent addiction. And
Hmm.
it's for a lot of reasons. One, I mean, it's not like a substance abuse addiction where you smell it on somebody's breath.
Hmm.
You can see it in their actions and what they're doing and how they're behaving. Uh, the money is gone, but most of the time, most problematic gamblers can hide that pretty easily and pretty
Hmm.
well until it's too late. So problematic gambling is very, very dangerous in the fact that suicide rates are actually higher with disordered gamblers than a lot of your substance abusers or anything else, because they can hit rock bottom and people don't know where they're at. And as far as that goes, without uh, we hide it very well. And I was able to do that very well with living a double life essentially. So for me, that was a huge thing, is just making sure that, and that's what I like helping people out now, is that so they don't hit rock bottom, and hopefully we
Hmm.
can catch them at Choices before we get to that point.
So I like that you hit the fact that it's called the silent addiction.
Yes.
So that means that it kind of goes along without detection for about how long? How long do you say it goes along without detection?
I mean, some people can hide it all of their lives. Some people hide it, I mean, can hide it for a few months, a few years. I literally spent 25 years of my life in addiction, in one form of addiction or another, one state of addiction or another. So started out as more of a slow progression, but in the last, I'd say 10 years of my life, I was truly living a double life. And I was putting on a good face as being a good father, as being a good employee, as having relationships and handling everything. It looked like anybody who knew me thought I had everything under control. I'm well educated. I have a bachelor's degree, a master's degree. I had good jobs. I was doing the things that people deemed as successful. Well, I was hiding this the whole time, and many people do the same thing. The thing about gambling as well too is that it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter as far as race goes, as far as ethnicity, as far as male, female, right, left, you
Mhm.
name it, any middle class, upper class, blue collar, white collar, it can truly affect anyone. And that's the thing about it, is that it just is so, it can creep up on so many people. And uh, it's important for me to let people know the warning signs and kind of just get out in front of it as much as we can.
Okay, that's good. So let's talk about this idea of gambling being addiction. I mean, because if I have the money, if I'm a millionaire or if I'm a thousandaire, okay, let's say I'm a thousandaire, okay?
Yeah.
I make a comfortable salary. I make it $400,000 a year, okay?
Okay.
So I'm living very comfortably. So what if I blow $100,000 a year on betting on the horses or betting on football games or whatever. So what if I do that? What's the big
Yeah.
deal?
It's it's still an addiction at the end of the day. You could say the same thing to someone who has a substance abuse addiction who makes that much money, is only spending that much money on their addiction. At the end of the day, the same effects as far as the rush, the same rushes, the same dopamine levels,
Okay.
the same effects chemically, physiologically, emotionally are all the same as any other addiction there. Those highs and those lows are what do the damage. Honestly, it's at the end of the day, the money is only a tool. The most important part is what it does to you, does to your family, it does to those you care about. It just like any other addiction, it robs you of your joy and your ability to function properly. I know that I was a sick individual before I got into recovery, and it took me a while, even in recovery, before I started to really regain who I was. The I thought for the longest time, I thought I was bipolar because of my highs
Hmm.
and my lows. Well, it turns out I really wasn't. And a lot of people are diagnosed with a lot of different mental health issues. And there are a lot of co-occurring issues that go along with gambling addiction because of the different emotions that you're feeling. And it takes a while to get to that point where you're finally clear-headed enough to realize that it was the gambling that was the monster that was causing that.
So let's be very specific and help us understand the exact signs of addiction, because how do I know if I can afford to spend, $100,000 a year? What makes it, what makes it so bad when it comes to gambling addiction? What's the issue?
I mean, the issue is just like any other addiction as far as uh, the way it affects you, the way it affects your family, the time
So
it
what are
takes.
wait.
Yeah,
What are some effects that we should be looking for? Give us some specific examples.
some specific examples. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it can be it manifests with everybody a little bit differently, but I would say the first things to look for would be uh I mean, just emotionally, if there's changes emotionally. I don't know if you're talking about from a family member, from a friend, you'll notice that. I can't say that you're going to notice things right away because a lot of times it doesn't necessarily manifest, but within the brain, I mean, the brain of an addict, it definitely is noticeable. As far as warning signs go, obviously the money is a thing, but if the money is not an issue, then you're
Mhm.
going to, uh, it's going to come out emotionally. It's going to come out a lot of the same ways any other addict behavior. I guess that's the biggest thing I wanted to take uh, is come across here is that it doesn't look any different, and it's diagnosed the same way as substance abuse addiction. It's diagnosed the same way as mental health issues. It can really come across the same way. So I don't think that, I mean, I could give you like warning signs, but it's going to look different for everyone. And I would say the money is the biggest thing, and that can obviously cripple families and cripple individuals if they run out of money. I've seen people in treatment who are down to their final $15. I've seen people who literally are going to be homeless, who literally have wasted all of their equity in their homes, who have spent their retirement, have done all these horrible things, and they still don't understand. They still don't grasp the severity of what they have going on. So that's for us. Our first thing is to help our clients understand the severity of what they're going through, how it has affected them uh, in all these different ways, emotionally, spiritually. That's a big thing with us at Choices, that we want to treat everybody holistically. So we want to make sure that we're getting to them spiritually, we're getting to them financially, getting to their obviously emotional needs, any mental
Mhm.
health needs, and obviously the financial piece of it too, and working with them to set up proper boundaries there with their money and their budget.
Okay, very good. I just want everyone to know, if you're on YouTube, you can take our poll, and the question is whether or not you've ever had an addiction, or if someone you love has had an addiction. And I also want to bring our attention to this great comment. I hope I pronounce his name correctly. I believe it is Ellery, but he's saying that his addiction is sugar, honey, ice cream, cake. I'm wondering, if I don't deal with it, I might end up a diabetic, and experience some type of amputation, which is really, really huge. I found that to be extremely powerful. Um, Really, what I'm hearing you say is that if it is affecting your life, in a way, in a negative way, but you can't stop, then you're actually at an addictive state. Is that right?
That's exactly how that's about as eloquent a way as I could put it for you right there, is that if you are to a point where it consumes your thoughts, it consumes your emotions, it consumes your actions, no matter what
Mhm.
the consequences are, that is an addiction. And there's so many addictions out there, especially in today's society, with our phones, with technology, with food, with sex, with there's so many different things out there. We're constantly bombarded by different stimuli, and all of these things can be addictive if they become problematic. Uh, I don't know how, if you're people on here tonight are familiar with the 12 steps, but if you're powerless over something, that is the first step in a 12-step program, is admitting you're powerless over whatever your addiction is. And that doesn't matter if it's food, it's gambling, it's sex, it's substance abuse, whatever it is, that powerless part of it, and it's a being unmanageable, that's what really defines that addiction.
Mhm. So the reality is, we can be addicted to anything, correct?
Yeah. And I would say for me, I'd say the biggest thing is obviously you want to do everything in moderation, but you also making sure that if you are substituting an addiction or addictive behavior, you want to make sure you're substituting it with positive things in your life that will go away from that addiction.
So, what I'm interested in is this crazy dichotomy that I keep hearing about addiction. You have to do a 12, the 12-step program. All you need is God. You can beat it cold turkey. I'm just hearing all of these different ways to do it, right? But at
Hmm.
the same time, so many people seem to be sold on their one way to do it. What are your thoughts on that idea?
I mean, there's different. You're absolutely right. There's a lot of different things out there, and there's a lot of different strategies out there as far as gambling, as far as any addiction out there, of ways of treating that. And there are
Mhm.
obviously methods. I'm currently in coursework to complete my addiction counseling certification, and we obviously learn techniques in those courses. But there's no one sure way, even with 12-step program, which I'm a firm believer in 12-step. I've been it's been very helpful to me in my recovery. Uh,
Mhm.
Even with that, for some people that doesn't work. A lot of with 12-step, a lot of it comes down to a higher power. It doesn't have to necessarily be God, but something that is considered a higher power to the addict. And if in that case, sometimes that can work. Other times that's not the proper way. I think the main thing is getting to know that person. As far as a counselor, as far as what we do at Choices, we want to get to know that person who with the addictive behavior, with those different, with their struggles, get to know them, work on their level, and help them develop a plan from there. It comes down to, at the end of the day, though, that person has to want to receive that help. Once you admit that you're powerless over the addiction and want to receive that help, there's plenty of ways to get past that addiction and get into a recovery state.
I see. Now, you see here, I am resting. I am resting on Brian's comment because he said he probably is a workaholic. And the reality is, I want you to know, all you guys on LinkedIn, this is for you. My Achievers group, this is for you. My Magnificent Moms group, this is for you. And the Millionaires group, this is for you. Because I'm quite sure that there are some workaholics in those groups. And I'm not poo pooing on you guys working. If I had an addiction, it probably might be that I love to work. I love getting stuff done. I delight in that. And I would probably say when I was newer to the workforce, when I first started in my professional career, I definitely was a workaholic for sure. I loved it. You know, I love the thrill and the rush of getting something accomplished and doing it just the way my boss wanted it. And my professional career really did start in recruitment. So that's a rush when you get to get someone a job. That's really like awesome, right?
That is, but
I'm
workaholics are
addicted.
addiction too, and that's the main thing you got to remember. There is that: is it affecting my relationships? Is it affecting the people that I care about? Is it coming to a place where it's problematic in my life? And working, even though it's a positive step in your life, can be that exact same thing. If it affects you and you're powerless over it, I mean, I have to be careful personally with that, because those who know me know that I like to work a lot too. And especially somebody in a gambling addiction who's spent so much money in their lives, for
Hmm.
and for a lot of other problem gamblers, the concept of wanting to earn that money back and earn everything back can be very
Hmm.
problematic too. So you got to worry about those substitute addictions no matter what. And workaholic, that's definitely one of them. Any behavior, no matter how positive it is, you could go work out 10 hours a day, and that's going to be problematic for you too. So you have to
Mm.
make sure, no matter how healthy the behavior is in moderation, that you're not getting to an addictive state with that behavior.
Ooh, everybody, we got to write that one down. No matter how healthy the behavior is in moderation, if it's getting to an addictive state, what did you just say? Say it again, because that
Let
was
me
good.
make sure. I don't know. I need to remember this stuff myself. I'll have to go back and listen to the recording so I know. But if it's no matter how healthy the behavior is in moderation, it can become problematic if and get to an addictive state.
Oh my gosh, that is such a profound idea. Um, because when we look at so many areas in our life, we're doing good things, but if we're doing them to the point in which they are bad, or and to the point they become toxic, then it's no longer a good thing. So I love it. Brian said again. He said that it hurt his relationship, um, and some people, particularly when they're young, they forego having relationships until which time their career is stable. Um, and not to pick on men, because women are starting to be like this more so as well. But men in their 20s, I think it's part of being a man. So that they want to establish their career, right? They want to get established before they have a relationship. So, how would you help somebody manage that particular idea? Because maybe it's right. Maybe it's the right time to forego relationships.
I mean, it is definitely about time and place there. And you've got to come down to, it's funny, I was actually staffing today at work and we talked about asking specific questions with some of our clients. And one thing was, what does it do for you and what does it do to you? So it can be as simple as writing down those pros and cons. What does it do for you? What does working too much do for you? Yeah, it makes me a lot of money. That's great. But what does it do to you? It ruins relationships. It doesn't allow me to have a social life. It doesn't allow me to find myself spiritually or attend church or do the things that are
Oh,
important to me in my
wow.
life that I need. So what does it do
I
for
gotta
you?
just have
To
you,
you?
let's hover over that. Stop. You said something that was so profound. You said that it doesn't allow me to find myself. And you went on to delineate different areas, but I think that's the one key thing. I think that's it. I think
Mm-hmm.
that is the thing, how you can tell whether or not you're addicted to something or not. If it's not allowing you to fulfill the rest of the parts of you.
That's beautiful. You're absolutely right because yeah, that's I know for me personally, my true who I was truly did not come out until after I fought my addiction. And it wasn't until a point where I was healthier and set healthy boundaries where I truly found who I was. And that's why I'm here tonight.
So I need a sound machine because I need a sound to go mind blown. I think Mike, you have just unearthed in my heart and my soul the thing that I've been just scratching at and trying to figure out through all of my addiction conversations, which is, why is this an addiction? What's going to make it an addiction? Um, Ing, who's also known as Ghostman here, that's not what it says. It says goose mess. But anyway, that's not the point. He says there is no moderation to using coke or heroin. And although kind of I agree, but the reality is when your grandma goes to get hip surgery and they give her a little heroin, they give her the good stuff too. She doesn't become addicted to it, and that's moderation. And do you know that Coke used to actually be in Coca-Cola? So everybody had a little, little bit of Coke, a little sprinkle. I'm sorry.
Well, no, and that's actually it's a good point you bring up in the food. Actually, the food concept of it's a kind of a cool thing to bring up there too, because something I learned in recovery as well, and I've used it with some clients as well too, is think about it from a standpoint of water, or green beans, or something healthy that you eat. You're not powerless over eating too much of that. You can eat a proper amount of that. You can do it in moderation. Uh, yeah, medication is necessary, but when it
Mm-hmm.
becomes something that you're powerless over, when it defines you, when it swipes your identity, that's when it becomes an addictive quality. So,
Mm-hmm.
uh, so prescription meds are the exact same way. It's very easy to fall into that, and that's just something you can't ever lose your true self.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's amazing. That's amazing. So let's get down to your work over at Choices. Tell me
Yes.
what you're doing with your clients over there, and how are you guys helping people?
So we do a lot of different things. We have, let me count right now. We have one, two, three, four to five at all times counselors over there that work with a variety of different addictions. We're kind of known in Nebraska as being the gambling
Hmm.
addiction kind of the go-to place, at least in our area. But there's other great gambling addiction counselors in the area as well too. But we do plenty of other stuff. We do substance abuse, which obviously there's a huge need for that. We do
Hmm.
anger management. We do some mental health as well, just general
Oh,
mental health
good on the
too.
mental health.
Yeah, so we're very much into holistic, very much into, because most addictions are co-occurring or have comorbidity there, as far as there's a element of mental health with that addiction, or there's an element of multiple addictions there. A lot of people come in, they think that they just have substance abuse. They might have gambling with it. They might have some depression and anxiety there that's unresolved. So it's important to work through all of these different things. And that's what we do at Choices. We're very committed to making sure that we're doing a holistic process. We're not just going to push off the substance abuse to the side if you came in for gambling. We're going to work through that as well too. And we have plenty of people that are current clients of ours and have past clients of ours who have worked through multiple addictions through us, and through some of the same strategies, or maybe a little bit different strategies for each different addiction, but are
Hmm.
willing to put in the time and effort. And if they're willing to put in the work, we're willing to do whatever it takes for them.
Mm. Let's talk about how fentanyl is affecting the addicted community when it comes to, I mean, they're putting fentanyl in everything, right?
And fentanyl is very scary. In fact, it's actually been a kind of a hot button thing here in Nebraska. We've had a lot of overdoses here in the last several months. People who have been recreational drug users who have, the term recreational drug user is kind of funny in itself, but who have used drugs that they thought were clean drugs, that had fentanyl in them, that ended up having lethal overdoses because of it. So it's a very dangerous, and it's very potent, and it can be used to cut a lot of drugs or added to a lot of drugs, but it still can obviously has very lethal effects. So it's something that you have to be concerned about, because I mean, anybody who's an addict or is dabbled in drugs or anything like that, you can't trust everybody that you've gotten your drugs from. You can't trust anything in your life as far as that goes, as far as making those healthy decisions. And you don't know when that fentanyl is there, and that could really, I mean, one dose of that can be lethal.
I think that's Ing's point here. He was saying medication is not an excuse for abuse, and um, his mindset is you can't mess around with heroin, you can't mess around with coke. Period. There is no such thing as recreational
Hmm.
use. Um, I am so amazed when people make the decision to use coke for fun, to use crack for fun, use meth for fun. You know, um, what is that stuff called? Dip. What do? It's you take marijuana and then you dip it in formaldehyde. That's what it
Yep.
is.
Hmm.
Formaldehyde. You dip it in and that's what is it called? Water or something? I don't know all the names. But the point is, you decide to do these things recreationally, meaning that you are doing it socially and for fun.
Which it
And
tells me that there's something missing in your life if that's what you're looking at for recreation. And it's a matter of finding what you're missing in your life, that you're
mhm.
trying to use the drugs, the alcohol, the gambling, the sex, whatever the unhealthy behavior is. We got to find out what is causing that reason, what you're trying to fill with that unhealthy behavior that you could be filling with a healthier behavior.
So I want to mix this question in with what George has to say. He said, how about social media addiction among youth?
Oh,
Okay.
hmm
Um, when we go to look for things for fun, but we find addiction, how can we navigate that? How can we fix that?
I mean, it's $1 million question right there, but it's, I mean, social media and just use of technology in general. I have a teenager myself, and it's definitely a tough road and can be very problematic. Like I said, anything can become an addiction. So it's a matter of, is it affecting your true self? Is it affecting your true identity? If you're doing something to the point where it affects your true identity, like social media, I mean, that's huge because that affects, especially amongst youth and teenagers, but at all ages, it sets up a dynamic in your life where you're trying to be something you're not. And it comes back to kind of the point you were making earlier as far as the identity piece and as far as your true self. So you're really not being your true self. So at the end of the day, you're addicted to being something you're not. And that's obviously very wildly unhealthy. So with something like that, it just comes down to finding who you are, who you truly are as a person. And that's part of what we do at Choices. And I think every good counselor does that, is you want to try to find your true authentic self. And what does that authentic self do? What is that authentic self? Who are they? What do they believe in? What are their morals and ethics? What are their beliefs, and what truly drives them? Once you can find that, that's usually when you can make real progress with addiction, with mental health, or anything.
Well, I have a question.
Yeah.
What if what if drinking and smoking, what if that feels like my true self? I must say, I just I know people that that feels like who and what they are. You know, wake up, drink, and get faded. That's feels like their identity. That's how they operate. They don't know themselves without that. And as a matter of fact, even in their mind's eye, that's how they see themselves. So, how do we approach that?
Well, I mean, there's obviously, I mean, they're sick in one way or another if that's how they necessarily, if that's how they feel about themselves, is that that's what their life is. Either that's what they've been modeled around, their environment, or
Yeah.
something within them that has caused them to feel that way. Uh, it's really simple to get in that. I mean, for myself personally, I was around gambling, I was around drug addiction and different things in my life earlier. So there's some of that that's environmental there that is almost, I mean, kind of just embedded in you that you need to truly dive into. And that's, I mean, with counseling, you can do that, but you have to understand too, when we do work with people are who are so stuck on that it's hard to get past that. I mean, you cannot get when this comment right there says normal to them. It is normal to them, and to get them to be convinced otherwise that it doesn't have to be that way, especially when their environment tells them and shows them constantly that that's what all that they're known for or good for, or that's what their identity is. It's hard to get them out of that mindset, and it's you just have to keep trying. You have to keep a counselor. I mean, might not be the first thing that you decide to do with them is going to work, but you have to keep trying different things to get them to understand that they can be more than that. And a lot of times it comes down to a self-esteem thing too, is that if you're don't believe that you can be more than that, and a
Hmm.
good counselor will help build you up and get you beyond that point as well too. So everybody has gifts. I mean, I'm truly believe that everybody has a gift out there beyond, and their identity can be something else beyond an addiction. If I define myself as a gambler all my life, then I will be a gambler. I'll act as a gambler. I'll act in a disordered manner. But if you believe that you are something else and that you can do other things, then that's when good things can begin to happen.
Hmm. I want to touch what might be a touchy subject, but what about sex addiction?
It's very real. I mean, it's a lot of times it's a co-occurring addiction with a lot of other addictions. So, I mean, a lot of people, when they get into alcohol, drugs, gambling, any other addictions out there, sex addiction can be just like any other as far as the dopamine levels that are released, as far as the action that they get out of it. In fact, it's something sometimes that it's more than just the actual pleasure of the sex. It can be just the
Mhm.
power, the hunt of finding it or
Mm.
getting it. It can be the power struggle there, the power, the what, getting to that point. It you got to, once again, it comes down to finding a true root to it and really working with a client to figure out what is causing that, because there's definitely, and I mean, the whole world is sexualized in one way or another, and that's not going away anytime soon. It's only getting worse and worse as far as what people see from a young age as far as sexual activity. And so it's, as that's becoming more normalized, and I mean, it's just something that's going to be there, and like any other behavior, healthy or unhealthy, if you are obsessed with it to a point where it does not, where it affects your authenticity, then you have a problem.
Hmm. Do you have to deal with an addiction like a sex addiction any differently than you would, um, like drinking or um, being addicted to like heroin or cocaine? Do you have to deal with it differently?
I personally, I believe you should deal with everybody differently, no matter what the addiction is. There's no cookie cutter way to handle anybody. Two people that have this exact same addiction, you don't treat them the same. You don't write the same treatment plan for them.
Mhm.
Everything has to be different. I think with any sort of addiction, the key is to get to a root cause, and find out what is going on in their lives that we believe in. I know with different addictions, we do a lot of timeline work with finding out people what they've gone through from the beginning of their lives all the way up to where they are now, and seeing what's gone on in their lives, and kind of getting to that root cause that way. Finding out, just really getting to know that client. I do think that there are some things that are kind of absolutes in addiction counseling, and that's getting to know that client and working with them and making sure that you're not giving them a one size fits all sort of treatment there. And that doesn't matter if it's sex addiction, gambling addiction, substance abuse, whatever that is. It looks different with everybody, but there, at the end of the day, there's always something there that they're either trying to hide from or trying to fill with whatever unhealthy behavior they're doing.
So, in the toolbox, so to speak, of a counselor or someone who is looking to get better, what are some possible things that they can do?
I
What does
mean,
recovery look like?
I'll speak more to start out with my own recovery and the things that we
Okay.
do. As for me, I'd say the first thing starting out with any person, any client in recovery, especially the very short term, is figuring out a way to get them to stop one day at a time. I'm a very big believer in the whole one day at a time uh, concept. Is that I keep track of my days, and I'm 435 days into my recovery. So for me, it was a matter of getting from day one to day two. And sometimes it's hour one to hour two, getting
Wow.
to a point where once you start putting some of these days together, putting some clean time together, that's when you can get to a point where then your brain starts acting a little bit healthier and a little bit more authentic. From there, then you put in a lot more techniques. For me, it's knowing that recovery is never going to end for me. I think that's something that's a very poignant thing to get across to someone who is an addict, that recovery is probably never going to end for you, and it shouldn't end for you. I know that I'm going to be an addict every day the rest of my life, and that it's something I have to consciously think about, whether I am now you don't want to dwell on it every day. You don't want to live in that, but you also want to be aware of that and be aware of that behavior and be strategic in what you do every day because of that. Now you can be more strategic. You can build more plans, short-term, long-term, on the more clean time you have, but that clean time really builds on itself. It's kind of like pushing that snowball, making that snowball bigger and bigger until it gets to something where it can be a good foundation for a snowman. It's you have to build that up. And once you're building more clean time and learning more skills, then you can really build that foundation.
That's amazing. Um, I want to talk about this idea, once an addict, always an addict, but we have someone from our Loveland community. Hello, CeeLo.
Peace, blessings to
Good,
you,
good, good.
and very, very important conversation. Let me tell you.
Thank you.
Yes, very important conversations. Conversations like this, I'm having for my training as an ambassador to the African Union, the United Nations.
Okay.
So we have to deal with this because of the initiative and agendas sometimes for neighborhoods, for dealing with poverty and dealing with drug use. Now, personally, I can tell you,
Hmm.
I'm gonna be very vulnerable here.
Okay.
I've
Okay.
went through a phase in my life of drug addiction, heroin, to be honest with you. I was a New York University student, right? So I used to commute. I used to take the number 2 train. If anybody anything about New York, and go down to the village and go to NYU. I was in CNAP, School of Education, Nursing, and Art Profession. But this is the problem. Every time I went to school, I was fine. When I got back to my neighborhood, I was around people that wasn't drug using. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was like, it was like, do your homework late, forget about, come hang out with us. And this is family members. Come hang with us, have a couple of beers, and smoke some weed. Or suddenly a bag of cocaine opens. Oh, and you're like, what's that? Oh, you never had this? So again, get trapped in it. And then the heroin came in, and it was a huge struggle. Let me tell you, I went through certain programs. I was on Sebastian, which I don't recommend any of that because at the long run, it's going to deteriorate your body. So I spend my time, healing from that. But that's why, what drove me to make the comments that I made about antisociable people. Antisociable people are people that don't have any care. They're harming the neighborhood. They have no care for humanity whatsoever. This is how they function. And I find, being from an Hispanic family, there was that personality in my family that caused this suppressive environment. You know, I try to get out. I had to move away in order to get away from that. You know what I'm saying? If not, I would have constantly been stuck on that. But
I I think that's a
same
great
point.
point. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
Mike,
Mhm.
how might your organization address an idea like that? Because I think you're getting to the point I was saying earlier, that
Mhm.
there are some situations that you can be born into where
Yeah.
that is normal, and it really is part of your identity and a part of your culture. And it doesn't have to be a poor family, it doesn't have to be a minority family or anything like that. It can just be the kind of family. They drink, they smoke marijuana, they do a little drugs,
The
it's called
neighborhood.
partying. It's
Yes.
partying. We're
Yeah.
partying, and that's how they party.
Yeah.
How does one break away from that?
Hmm.
I mean, we are firm believers in the whole concept of, we have within our system, within the city of Lincoln, within the state of Nebraska, we have 3-quarter houses to go to. We're totally an outpatient treatment center, but we have places that you can go to get away from that environment, that are clean environments. And for a
Yes.
lot of people, that's what they need, is that
Yeah.
change of scenery is what they need. I know for me, I'm absolutely fall into that because I come from a family of gamblers. And I know that if I were to stick with that, I have people in my family who are disordered gamblers now. I've had people in my past who have had drug addictions, who have had other addictions. I know I can love them. but I know that I can't be in their lives every day around them in the same way that I can the people who are healthy for me. And that's why you look at halfway houses, three-quarter houses as being healthy solutions for people at times. That's why that's why inpatient treatment is healthy for a lot of people, because that gives them the opportunity to start over, where an outpatient situation might not be able to do that, because once they leave their clinic, they're going right back into that environment. So that's why inpatient works for some people. That's why three-quarter houses work for some people. Outpatient treatment is kind of considered the bottom level of treatment, but you have to be the strongest to be able to do that, because if you can go back out in your community, the people you care about, respect, been around your entire life, that you love, that are still in that behavior, it's really hard to get past that. And I think we all yearn to be connected. And I think that's a lot of what addiction is too, is connectedness in a bad way. So it's a matter of being connected in positive ways versus negative ways, and finding, because there's a lot of loneliness and isolation in addiction, whether it is with people or with other people. It comes down to a lot of times loneliness and isolation, and it's finding that right community to be a part of.
Right.
So I want to park right here on what Stanley is asking. He talks about parents, but I like the back half of his question. Multi-generational addiction really is what he's getting at. And so when your social circle, when your self-identity, and when your family has an addictive culture and personality, let's say you go away to a halfway house, a inpatient facility, but now when you come back, you have no connectivity, because you have no connection to the people who you grew up with, who you share an identity with. What steps can one make to stay connected to the people, but not the addictive behavior?
You want to go ahead and answer that.
If they could figure that one out, it would be all right. But
I'm wondering, what does that look like?
And I was just going to ask Mike something. Do you think that economics also, like for instance, in terms of community, because if the economic is shot, because I'm looking at it from my personal view, it was easy for me, to go out into the street and sell drugs at point to supply my habit. But in a community like that, it's easy because there's drugs all over the place. So you get the big wheel, he's giving you product, and you out here and you doing your thing in the street. Street entrepreneur, I call it. You know what I'm saying? So again, do you think that economics also play a role in that? And that goes into generational also, like the brother, I put up there, multi-generational.
Absolutely. So I would say that definitely any socioeconomic factor, and I consider social and economic right together. That's why they call it socioeconomic, because they both work together. If you grew up in an environment, if you grew up in a project versus you grew up in the country club, you can still have the same problems, but you can have different things that are going to, if the behavior that you want to emulate, you're going to emulate that. Right. Now, to answer your question, Coach Love, as far as what can you do to mitigate some of that, or to set those boundaries against that, that's where things like such as having sponsors, getting involved with different groups like your Alcoholics Anonymous, your Narcotics Anonymous, your Gamblers Anonymous, those groups, whether you believe in the 12 steps or not, that's up to you. But having the sponsor and having those people, those healthy people in those groups, are what can drive you. And that can be the community that you thrive on versus the community that does the negative behaviors that drive you, that suck you back down.
Stanley's been wanting us to talk about, epigenetics. Yes, he's been wanting us to talk about that. He's been wanting us to talk about breaking the cycle and how one can get that done. I think maybe you just offered a few tools to do that. Having a sponsor, and then getting involved into other communities, as well. And then let me introduce another family member from Love's Land, one of the honeybees. Ing, hello, welcome, Ing. How are you?
No, I thought you're gonna bring up a fifth guy and didn't introduce me.
Oh,
No.
oh my gosh! Oh my gosh!
See, Liz,
Mike, I want you to
good
know
to
the
talk to you
Loveland
again.
community is really
Nice to meet you, sir.
appreciating you. That's why they're coming to chat with you.
Well, you,
Go ahead, Ing. What's your question?
no, like it's about the multi-generational thing. I didn't know I was an alcoholic until I moved to Canada because alcohol was always. My grandmother gave me vermouth or like martini just to sleep better. And it was like that's how it went. So you don't really get the point of it until it's a problem. And it's always progressive. It builds up. And even though the rest of my family are alcoholics, they're not in Canada, so what do I care? But it's just a thing. However, it is a gateway drug, alcohol as well. Because when I moved to Canada, I was 30 years old. So it was the first time I smoked a reefer. And I thought, oh, if this is everything of drugs, let's try it all. And then you're a crackhead, and 3 years later, your wife kicks you down the stairs. Like it is progressive, and at times I believe that we maybe do not give enough knowledge about it. Like drugs are drugs. It's not. When you smoke weed, it's different than when you smoke crack or do heroin. It's different. So the build up to it and
So, Mike, how do you make a difference between those particular addictions? And I'm going to go ahead and ask you this question because 12-step program for kids. I want you to talk about that as well. Is that appropriate? And how does that get done? So listen, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Break it down to us.
I think with the 12 steps, I think it can work at all ages. I'm not personally, I wouldn't call myself an expert because we don't deal with a ton of young adults as far as teenagers and kids and that sort of thing. I will tell you that the first thing with a 12-step program at all is understanding if you have a higher power. Doesn't have to be God. It doesn't have to be what you normally think of as a higher power, but having that higher power. And sometimes that can be difficult as a kid. Sometimes that higher power might be your mom or your dad, and it could be totally different. So 12 steps looks entirely different for a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 16-year-old versus a 30-year-old, a 40-year-old, a 70-year-old, So I'm not going to say that 12 steps is good or bad for everyone or anyone. We personally believe in it at Choices, but not all of our clients work a 12-step program either. And I want to make that perfectly clear. But as far as that goes, I do think that that's something that it's a tool. Just like anything else, there's tools out there. You don't have to use all of your tools on every project, but having those tools in your tool belt is what's key to.
It's important.
So go ahead.
Question. Oh, sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
Mike, do you think that the 12-step program at times is abused by their addict? Sometimes it seems like they just try to get
The little
clean
color
so
thing.
they can start again. I'm just saying.
Oh, addictive. Well, I'll just put this out there straight up that addicts, I mean, if they've abused drugs, if they've abused whatever their behavior is, they know how to abuse a lot of things, and they know how to abuse the system. They know how to abuse, and especially if you've been through the process, as far as been through the recovery process, you're going to learn some of the lingo. You're going to learn some of the behaviors. You're going to learn some of the things that are praised in recovery, and you're going to emulate those without necessarily believing them. So that's when it comes down to somebody who's truly ready to recover versus somebody who's just playing the game. You're going to see people play the game. And
so would you agree that someone could clean up without the 12-step program?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. I'm not going to, and I won't, I don't know if my boss would necessarily say yay or nay, but I personally believe that you can clean up without the 12-step program. You can clean up as long as you find something that works for you. Sometimes it might just be risk mitigation might be the best thing for someone too. If it gets to a point where they're not going to totally quit something, well, let's get it to a point where you're not doing it so in such an unhealthy manner, in such a addictive manner that it's going to ruin your life. Let's work on maybe. We have a lot of people in the legal system that are working through criminal charges, who are working through different things that, hey, let's make a goal of let's keep you clean for 6 months so that we can get you off probation. Let's do things like that, and let's work it that way. Sometimes you have to treat it that way. Maybe they're not meant to go through recovery long term. It's not, at the end of the day, I can only do what I can as a counselor. I can only use the tools that I have as a counselor to get them so far. If the client is not willing to go any further, I know that I use the tools that I have in order to do the best job that I can for my client.
See, I didn't go through 12 steps. I'm sorry.
I just want to say that this is the first time in all these programs that we've had on addiction that someone's even mentioned risk mitigation. So I applaud you for talking about that. We definitely want to go deeper on that. And then 𝐊𝐄, go ahead and ask your question.
No, I would just I was going to reaffirm that because I didn't go through the 12 steps of being an ex-addict, But I find what worked for me, again, was isolation. Getting away from the neighborhood, getting away from individuals that I know. Now, if I ever have a relapse, it's because I went back to the neighborhood, and I went, you know what I'm saying, to the individuals that I know you can give me access to that.
So
I choose to say,
do you think you were addicted to the people that were doing it, or do you think you were addicted to the item?
Good question. I think it started with the people. The people, the camaraderie.
Camaraderie. You were addicted to the camaraderie.
The people, exactly. Because especially from an Hispanic, perspective, we're very cultural and we're very togetherness. You know what I'm saying? And yes, it's
you're part of the gang.
Yeah, you're part of the gang. You want to be accepted. But you see, I was an odd child. I'm going to New York University, but I was the only one in the neighborhood going to a university, an Ivy League university. But I'm coming home. Yes, that's a good point. Yeah, addicted to the people. Very great point. Yes.
You can be addicted to people. It can provide those same levels of dopamine. It can provide that same level of action, that just having those people. And it's just like anybody else, whether you're addicted to people or not addicted to a situation. If you're not an addict or not an addict, it's a matter of keeping toxic people out of your life at the end of the day. And we all have to deal with that, no matter if we're addicts or not. It's about keeping those toxic people at bay in your life.
But it's hard if it's family and friends.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. It's hard if it's family, friends, and culture. Acceptance, identity. I mean, I just want us to really kind of hover over what 𝐊𝐶 is saying. He keeps saying, about his culture. It's who he is. It's not what they're doing. This is who they are. And so pulling himself away from that meant losing. It would be like someone said, okay, you can no longer have your family. You can no longer have your name. You can no longer eat the food that you associate with home. You can have no comfort. And here he is, the only Ivy League kid, right? So he's already different,
Different.
Mhm.
Yeah.
you know?
I
You
love
have to,
seeing
yeah, yeah. I had to grow that willpower, to say,
Right.
hell with you, man. You can find out. I found other groups of people. You know what
Hmm.
I'm saying? I'm a musician, so I started. Even though in the music business, you have to be very careful because
Mhm.
drugs is, when I went to Cabo San Lucas to play with Sammy Hagar, and man, the parties there was anything you wanted was there. But now Sammy himself
he
don't do that.
claims he's sober for 15 years. Just saying.
And no. Sammy didn't do it. But then the tequila shot, because at that time
Environment.
was
And yeah.
tequila environment. So he said, "Oh, I can't shoot no more." But everybody else, so that environment, what I'm saying, can open up the door for certain things. Yeah, yeah. So
Oh my
And
music
we as
industry yeah.
as individuals have to decide what's healthy for us and what's not
Yes,
at the end of the
yes,
day. And to move beyond that, you have to it's no matter how good a counselor is around you, no matter how good your community is around you, at the end of the day, it comes down to what you believe in. If you believe strongly enough that this is something that's going to be problematic for you, then you need to get away from it. If it's something where you're not to that point yet, then there's not a lot that maybe I can do or anybody else can do. And sometimes you have to let that person get to that point. So, and it's not a failure on anybody else's part. And I think that's something that
We did
needs to be understood.
question.
Yeah.
So, do you think? I was told that there's two ways that you can overcome a desire, and that is by abstaining from it totally, and the other one is engulfing yourself in it until you burn yourself out. You know what I'm saying? So I'm saying, is that accurate? I mean, is there any other way?
So
You know what I'm
one
saying?
statement was from your drug dealer and the other one from your doctor.
I tend to believe that. I think number two probably came from your
Yes, yes,
provider,
yes,
your
yes, yes,
financial
yes,
consultant
yes.
there. I would never suggest number two as a professional, but I understand what you're saying there entirely as far as that goes. But at the same time, what you're saying there as far as abstaining goes, I have clients going back to my gambling, going back to the gambling clients I work with. I have one I'm working with right now who told me, well, I quit this gambling, but I still buy lottery tickets, or I still do this, or I still do that. Personally, me, I couldn't do that. I had to go cold turkey on everything. But for them, they might not be problematic in this area or that area. So it's a matter of that's developing treatment plans that work for the individual at the end of the day is what it comes down to. And there's not going to be a cookie cutter method out there. Anybody who tries to tell you there's one method to cleaning up or one method to quitting addiction, no, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. If it just sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
But in the
Wow.
part of engulfing yourself, I did so much heroin that after a while, I hated it. The dope sick,
Mm.
getting sick in the morning,
Yeah,
and,
but
and, and
you're
your money's
lucky you
depreciating.
survived. You could have overdosed at
You could,
any
oh
point of
yeah,
time.
I
Yeah.
overdosed once before, but I'm saying, it's like you get tired of it. I got to a
Okay.
point that I just totally was like, all right, I gotta get this bag just to function. Just to function. I gotta get cured. I gotta get this bag just to function, but I hate it. You get to a point where you hate it, hate it, hate it.
So what you described there is the difference between being a social anything to being problematic something to being disordered something. And there's a clear
Mm.
delineation between the three. And I mean, a social drinker, social drug user, whatever, still enjoys it. The problematic one's getting to the point where, hey, I'm just doing this trying to fit in, whatever. The disordered person doesn't like what they're doing, but they're still doing it because they know no other way at that point. So it's very important to make that delineation with people. Are you social? Are you problematic? Or are you disordered?
Mm. Stanley's had this question hanging out here, and as we round things up, I want to try to get to it. He's like, 12 step parents with kids. How do the parents deal with their kids? Um, and that's really a broad question. So I'm not sure exactly where he wants to go with that. But can you tell me how it hits you, Mike?
I guess I'm trying to figure out, does he mean 12 steps as far as the parent going through 12 steps or the kid going through 12
Yes, no,
steps?
It's
the
the
parent.
parent going through
Yes.
12 steps. How do you break that to your kids? Do you get your kids involved maybe? Do you tell them that that's what you're doing? What's the best way for a parent to navigate that situation?
First of all, I will tell you that it's, once again, there's no cookie cutter, no one best way, because it comes down to maturity of the kid, maturity of the parent. I don't want to, my daughter is 14 years old and she understands a lot of what I've gone through, and I've explained a lot to her. We've both had our struggles together and I've made her understand. I'm hoping that she can learn from it. I'm not going to drag her down into the nitty gritty. I'm not going to tell her all the specifics of what I've been through in my life, because no, you shouldn't have to do that. But I also do think that there's something there about being raw and being real with your children, as far as letting them know, being vulnerable with them as a parent. That's just parenting. That's not even necessarily being an addict. Sometimes being vulnerable shows more strength than putting your head in the sand with stuff. And I think the same thing can be said with addiction or any mental health in general, because as you all know these days, mental health is something that is not, there's still a stigma out there with it. And I consider addiction in that same boat there. There's still stigma there, but we need to get beyond that. And by talking about it, by what we're doing tonight, what we're talking about with our kids, that's how we get past the stigma, is by being real about it and talking about it without getting into the nitty gritty, without getting into dirty details, until they get to a point where they're able to navigate that. But I don't think that there's anything wrong with being real with them, but obviously there's limits to that as well.
But they
So
don't
maybe
have to go through your hassles. Like, you don't have to get your child through the 12-step program.
No.
Be
I'm not.
Yeah.
No, I would never sit down
No,
with my daughter and
yeah,
go
yeah.
through the 12 steps with her. And anybody who does that, I'm thinking that they're probably substituting a different behavior that's not healthy for the behavior that they're trying to get rid of. And that's when I would probably put that client in check, if they're trying to do that.
Sorry, I cut you off, Coach.
that's fine. Good comment. I just want to try to make this real if I can, because if I'm hearing the heart of a dad talking to his children about an addiction that he has, he probably doesn't want to be a failure in their eyes. He doesn't want to lose his super dad status. He doesn't want them, his kids to think he's broken or a failure in any way. So maybe what words can this dad use, this parent use, to really help them understand that, dad's having a hard time with this, but I'm still your dad and I'm still here for you.
Right.
You know,
I think what you just said is what you need to say. I don't think you need to overcomplicate it, to be perfectly honest. I think that there's something there, as far as just being vulnerable is not as, and I'm only speak for a father, but I can speak for any parent, but being vulnerable is part of being a good parent as well, too. You can be strong and be vulnerable at the same time. And you want them, the reason why, and you make sure you let them know the reason why I'm telling you this is because I don't want you to make the same mistakes. And I am working through this sort of stuff. I love you, and that's why I'm doing it. A lot of what I've done in recovery is for my kids, is for who
Well,
I.
let me ask you, Mike, but do you feel
love
that the
Carter.
time is very important, like to be engaging a conversation with your child while you are experiencing this addiction is a little bit kind of, not the right thing to do. But if you're a parent that has gone through this addiction and has had, lost a better word, beat it and whatever, cure, that is that the difference? You know what I'm saying? Does that would that create, you feel it's advisable to just if they're, if you're going through this addiction, that it's not advisable to speak to your children, because they're gonna look at you like, yeah, dad, you telling me not to do this and that, but you're doing it right now. Really?
Yeah. I
As
mean,
opposed, yeah, as
there's
opposed to
hypocrisy
somebody
there.
that says, look, I've done it in the past, and I'm telling you now, it's not the way to go. Look at me, what happened, but look at me now. I had to change my life, and look at the success I'm having now. It's a better example than to be, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. That
Yeah,
makes, I mean, you don't want to be hypocritical in anything you say
right.
or do. I think as a
Exactly.
parent, that's definitely true. You don't want to be hypocritical because kids see and observe and know so much more than we give them credit for. So there was times when I was struggling that I'm sure my daughter saw, and I'm sure my daughter knew exactly what was going on. But obviously might not have been able to articulate it or be able to say it or be courageous enough to say it in that moment, or have the need or desire to say it at that moment. But we don't give them enough credit a lot of times for understanding situations. And for us to be hypocritical, that's going to open a lot of negative doors down the road. So, yeah, it's all about timing. Without a doubt, you have to, it's time and place with just about anything. And that's interacting with anybody in general, time and place, and having that tact and having that understanding of that's being self aware.
Because from
Mm.
experience, when I was in my addiction, I shoved my kids. I got four. My youngest is 28 years old, and I was like, no, you know what I'm saying? They don't want to be bothered. Now, when
You're a
I
proud father.
overcame, yeah, when I overcame my addiction, and they saw the difference, they embraced it.
Mhm.
Man, Dad, you changed. You know what I'm saying? Wow. And now to this day, they don't do they don't do no
So
drugs.
they saw what happens when you stop
Right. Yeah.
or not
Okay.
even get involved in it.
Well,
Stanley, who's that question for? I'll be happy to let them answer it. Or maybe I mean, can both of you answer it, I
Can,
suppose?
can,
Go ahead.
can, one is 19, the other 15. They didn't see me as a crackhead and alcoholic, but they both know. And they know both. If they ever do any drugs, I will smell it from a mile.
Mm, I see.
there is something to be said about that too, is that you know what they've gone through, and you know what you've gone through, and you know when they're going through it as well too. There's something to be said about that.
Oh yeah. Wisdom. You got the wisdom.
Absolutely. There's something to be said about that. And my addiction, to answer the question, my addiction was before I had my daughter, but and continued on all through until a little over a year ago. So I mean, she saw it in
Um,
different ways. But and it doesn't matter when it started, when it ended, as long as you're real about it, as long as you're not hypocritical about it. You want to make sure that you're setting those examples there, but that they're learning from it. And if it's not, if you're telling them something and they're not, and it's not teaching, if you're telling them for your benefit, then it's not the right reason. If you're telling them for their benefit, then that's the right reason. And there's a
I
lot of
see.
times that we do that in life, where we tell somebody something for our benefit and not theirs. And that's the wrong reason. We're
So what you
Mm,
were saying, because it would be an excuse if you tell them why you are not up to date, like it's just that my kids never saw me high and drunk, but they both know my limits, and you
mm.
have to give it to them. And
That's
My
very good.
my addiction started after my first daughter.
Okay.
When I was in the conception of my first daughter, no drugs, clean. Now my second daughter and my third son, and I see the difference. And then my last child, drug free. So I do see the difference. So it did impact them in a way. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
From experiences, I could
Did
tell you
it
that.
impact their health or their mental
Yes,
ability,
their mental ability. Well, not too much. My
their
younger
cognition?
daughter, but my son right now is dealing with schizophrenia. And I always say to
Mm,
myself, where did it skip? But it runs in the family. But you see, in my family also, there was drug addiction. And
did
I
mhm.
you
could
ever
see
think
that.
it was your fault? Don't think that. But
No, no, no,
sometimes as
no.
a father, you always
Mhm.
We're vulnerable. We make,
we are. Yes.
we're vulnerable. And especially being raised up in the Bronx, New York, typical area where, I want you want to see your way out, but it's difficult. You have to find your way out. But in the midst of that, you know, family. You fall in love, you have kids, and you know what I'm saying, and then you're getting so high, you're not even realizing what you're doing. You think it's enhancing your sex ability, you know what I'm saying? For a while it is, but then again, you're like later on, you're like, wait a minute, I could have
Yeah.
done this without having any drugs, Just practice Kama Sutra Tantra, you know what I'm saying? So I think it's an education, I think that I think that and now that I think is that I kind of like follow more, like what one of the elders of Isukampo said that if you arm the youth with certain knowledge, with good knowledge and truth, then
Mhm.
they is a lesser chance for them to be conquered and enslaved. Drug addiction is an enslavement.
Oh,
You know what I'm
yes.
saying? You
Oh,
have to
oh,
arm them with knowledge, with the proper knowledge. So that's why now with my kids, hey, listen, get into tantra. You know what I'm saying? Get into health, know your body, know your, and I use the most high frequency, which is to
mhm,
me, it's the sun. Know about how you eat the sun energy. So it's a whole holistic, it's all totally different. So when you arm them with the proper knowledge,
You
then they
have a
can't,
hood on in your
huh?
room.
Yeah, it's a thin hood. I was working out.
Well, there's no
The
sun
work.
right now. I know you would take the hood off
You
it.
know what I mean.
Yeah, I
Oh,
know.
his hair is messed up and he doesn't want to show it to
You're still getting
everybody.
sun energy. You're still getting sun energy right now because you're breathing the air.
I love serious.
H2O.
I love
H2O is the
that.
sun. H2O is come from the sun. So it doesn't. You don't
I
have to see
love it.
sunlight.
I love it.
You can still. So yeah. I think that that type of knowledge is very very important. You know, and yeah.
Oh, awesome. Well, you're leaving here with homework, Mike. The next time you come back, I want you to talk about, yes, very much so. Beautiful job. Beautiful
Thank you.
job.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.
Yes, but you're leaving here with homework.
I got to get you one of those.
Yes! Thank you. I love it.
Right. Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you so much, Milos. I love it. I
Who
love
paid
it.
for your
Y'all are amazing.
soundboard, Coach Love? Who paid for your soundboard?
But no,
I'm gonna have to
this
get.
is true. You
I'm
didn't
gonna,
call me. I'm
I'm gonna have to
delighted.
get you one now.
Jesus Christ.
Oh, please do. Yes, please. I would love
I'm gonna
one.
have
I
to
would love
get
one.
you one.
But I wanted to ask you this. This is your homework. This is what the community still needs. We
Okay.
need to talk about uh, multi addictions and how sometimes you go to recovery and you leave out with a new addiction. I want to
Right.
talk about that, and then please bring us some counselors back with you who can help us understand kids and addiction. You
Kids and
know,
addiction. Yep. Okay.
kids and addiction. We would
Please do.
appreciate that
Please. Yeah,
immensely.
definitely, definitely.
And that's, I mean, with everything that's going on right now, our youth are exposed to so much more these days that it's just a matter. It's just a fact that there's going to be more addiction. There is more addiction currently, and there's going to be more addiction with younger and younger as we go along. And whether it's their phone, whether it's substance abuse, whatever it is, and it's a reality. So yeah, I could definitely help you guys. Hopefully, find some more people who can give us some more expertise on that as well too, because there's parents in the room here. We all have to deal with it, and we all have to be cognizant of it. So absolutely, sounds good.
Absolutely. Don't you love that you
Thank you.
came here and got homework?
I love it. Everything in my life, whether it's my classes I'm in now, or whether it's work, or whether it's here, I love homework. So bring it
Yeah.
on. I'm willing to. Well, it
Awesome.
makes
You
me
know what?
grow. All
Yeah,
about growth.
yeah.
So
You know what we're doing with the ambassadorship. For the training for ambassador with the task force officers is we're
Okay.
studying 19 courses, and the 19 courses comes out of Scientology. Believe it or not.
Oh, really?
I'm not propagating Scientology, but there is some heavy studies in Scientology.
I
You know what I'm saying?
They're
know.
not wrong about everything. They have some good points. Let's
No,
just
I
say
mean,
it.
those 19 courses is a requirement for the ambassadorship, and so there is a chapter on drugs and habits, drugs, integrity and honesty,
Mm.
And yeah, that's one of the requirements that we have to. And some of the, maybe later on you could speak about that. And I mentioned in the chat about nutrients. They
Oh
say
yeah.
magnesium, B complex,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
complex B. That the nutrients, and they find that it stops relapse.
Oh really?
Yes, I don't know. I got to really dig into the chemistry of that.
Diet is very important.
Very important.
Not to
Absolutely.
There's
Yes.
no doubt about it.
I love
No
it.
doubt about it.
Mike, I'm going to give you the last word. You've given us way more than five key steps, way more than that. But if you were to sum it up, what might be 5 key steps?
5. I'll have to narrow it down to 5. Well, I would just say I'm not even going to worry about a number here. I'm just going to say that it comes down to finding your true authentic self at the end of the day is what it comes down to. And getting yourself away from that addiction, it comes down to truly finding who you are and what is important to you, and replacing those addictive behaviors with something healthier. And I can't give you just 5 that are going to be a cure-all, because there's nothing out there works for every individual that's going to be 5 things. But just finding what your true authentic self is, and if it takes getting away from that addiction for a little bit, cleaning up your mind a little bit, then really reflecting on who your true authentic self is, that's when you'll get past it and truly get into recovery.
Love it.
I love it.
Thank you very much for that.
Excellent.
You guys are amazing. I need you to walk around with me all day, so I have people, my cheerleaders, by my side all the time.
I love it.
Bullshit. Mike, fight your own battles, Mike.
That's
Oh,
No, I'm so glad I met you. I'm so glad I met you.
Yes.
You guys are great. I
Yes,
appreciate
Mike,
you so much.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you for coming. Look, thank you for coming, everyone. Family, stay here backstage. But guys, we're going to go ahead and get out of here. Have a great day, and thank you for watching. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you.
Yes.